we're doing the listing contracts today. Let's see, Garrett just left. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oh, good. Okay. Is my screen shared with everybody?
Yes.
Yes, I can see it. This is Alicia.
Okay. Hey, Alex, Alicia. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
All right, cool. So we're going to jump right into the listing contracts. I've just got, you guys should hopefully be familiar. Well, I know some of you guys are brand new, so maybe you're not familiar with that loop yet, but you will get familiar with that loop. So I've just made a folder here for our listing contracts, and I will start going through them. Guys, this is a discussion. If I just go through this, it's going to take me 15 minutes, but I really want you guys to stop me and ask me questions if you need to. Yeah, this is really intended to be a discussion more than a class. The first thing we need, obviously, is a consumer guide to agency relationships. Hopefully you guys have seen this before. This is our KW Living guide. So it says that we could represent a seller, says that we could represent a buyer. It explains what dual agency is. However, we all know we do not practice dual agency in our brokers. So when you're using this document in a listing presentation, you can tell them that you will be representing them as a seller and your fiduciary duties belongs to them as a seller, and that if you happen to have a buyer for their particular property, because you've got a listing agreement with the seller, you will represent them, and your buyer may choose to be unrepresented. If the buyer's not comfortable being unrepresented, then you can always refer them to another agent in our office who can represent them for this transaction. Dual agency we don't do, and you guys need me to show you how to use that loop and assign fields and type in everything here. So if you have John Doe seller, you'll assign that field to them. This is, can you hear me okay? I'm getting a notice that my audio quality may be affected. Can you guys still hear me okay?
It's a little splotchy at times.
Yeah,
Hang
same for
on.
me.
1 second here. I don't know if it's. Okay. I don't know if this will help or not, but hopefully it's helpful. So this is your exclusive right to sell agreement. And you're just gonna fill in your seller's name here. And when I present this to my sellers, I kind of just go through paragraph by paragraph and give a summary of it. If they want to read the whole thing, then I would encourage them to read the whole thing and ask questions about it. But basically, you know, the seller or the owner that has the lawful right to sell the property, and they're authorizing Solon Real Estate LLC, DBA Keller Williams Living, to sell the property exclusively for them. Property address, pretty self-explanatory. You guys are gonna agree on a listing price. And that number is gonna go in there. That's doesn't have to be your ending number. It could be where you list it, and you may have to take price reductions. You may have to, you may get multiple offers and it may go over that number, but that's your listing the listing price. Your your exclusive period, when does it begin? So let's say we're beginning it today. Now, what I've done on my listing contracts, and you guys are more than welcome to adjust to however fits your business the best. When I got licensed 15 years ago, houses were not selling as fast as they are today. So I was taking 6-month listings, and frankly, many of them weren't selling in that 6-month period. So that's how I started 15 years ago, and that's still how I do it today. Is I take a 6-month listing agreement, but I usually tell my sellers, yeah, I don't plan to have your listing in 6 months from now. We want to sell it quickly. I suppose in this market, there's not really a need to take it for 6 months. So if you wanted to take it for 60 days or 90 days or whatever fits your business practice best, you can do that. Just make sure your expiration date goes here. And so it's expiring at midnight on that day. So if I said it's expiring on October 31st, that means I have it, that listing on October 31st is still mine all day long until midnight. So it's expiring at the end of the day on the 31st of October. Any questions? Okay. This paragraph here explains to your seller that this is an exclusive right. It explains to them that they will not hire anybody else to sell their property during this period that we called for this example, July 12th till October 31st. That you are their exclusive agent during that time. Your commission's going to go here. You guys can decide what your commission will be. We do have a rule in our brokerage that you may not accept less than 1% on any particular deal. And that's your side of the commission, by the way. So it has to be greater than 1%. And with any 12-month period, your average must be at least 2%. So if you want to do a favor to a friend and drop it to 1%, that's fine, just as long as it doesn't drop your average commission over the last 12-month period to below 2. This commission here, though, that you're going to write in, this is your total commission. So this is actually covering both sides for the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. So you guys can decide what works well for you. We're allowed to talk about commission in this class because we're all in the same brokerage. If you guys were with other agents from other brokerages, we would not be allowed to talk about commissions because that could be an antitrust law violation. My typical commission is 7% on the first 100 and then 6% on the balance. That's what I typically charge. You guys are welcome to charge whatever you want. It also says there's a additional commission of $200. And if you have a minimum fee, you should put that in here. Most of the time, the minimum fees don't come into play, but might be like around $3,500 minimum is probably a fair number to have as your minimum commission. In other words, that would, at the commissions that I said I'm charging, that would be a $50,000 sale. So if you're under 50,000, I'm still getting the $3,500 plus the $200. There's a protection period. So while I said in this case, our listing starts today and expires on the 31st, it also talks about there's a protection period. So it says that if the property sells within 6 months after the expiration of our listing agreement to somebody that Keller Williams Living has shown the property to. In other words, we were the procuring cause. Even if they don't come and buy that property by October 31st, if we showed it to them before October 31st and they come and buy it within 6 months, we've earned our commission. We get to step back into that deal and represent the seller, and we earned our commission on that. There is a protection for the seller that says if they hire another broker to represent them, then we're out of luck. So if in other words, I lost the listing, it expired, they go now and hire an agent from another brokerage. And then that buyer that I had shown it to, not my buyer that I'm representing, but somebody that I was procuring cause for, comes and buys it because they're represented by another brokerage at that point, then I'm out of luck. But essentially what we're trying to stop is from sellers telling buyers, hey, you can come back tomorrow on November 1st and I don't have to pay 7% commission, so I can give you a better deal on November 1st. Well, that's not going to fly, right? So we have that 6-month protection, but the seller also is not going to pay 2 commissions to 2 different brokers because of that. Alicia, you got your hand raised.
Right. What goes in the line that says broker and then blank?
Shall pay the broker 7%.
The words, not the broker's name. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Seller shall pay broker 7%, and then in parentheses, I type the number 7 or 6 or 5 or whatever you're charging. But that's the total commission. Plus
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Then we talk about cooperation. So I usually explain this to my sellers saying, we cooperate with any broker. I don't care who has the buyer as long as the buyer's ready, willing, and able. It doesn't matter to me who's representing them. And as long as, they're represented by a buyer's agent, then that buyer's agent will get compensated out of that 7% or the 7% of the first 100, 6% on the balance. And then you'll notice, I think 3% on the first 100 and 2% on the balance for the buyer's agent is a fair commission. That's what I usually get paid when I represent a buyer. If I get paid more than that, I feel like it's just a bonus. Every once in a while, you might see 3.5% on the first 100 or 2.5 on the balance, or maybe it's a straight 3%. But most brokers are offering a 3-2 split for the buyer's agent. I think that's what you'll find pretty standard in our MLS at least. So that's what I always offer. And maybe the word standard isn't the right word, but it seems like it's common practice. And again, we're talking about this because the 3 of us were all in the same, 4 of us were all in the same brokerage, so we're allowed to talk about this, but we need to be careful when it's anybody from outside our brokerage. We're not allowed to be talking about what we're charging. Got it? Questions until now?
I have a question about the procuring cause for a deal. How often have you had to use that? Is it common? Is it not common?
No, not common.
Okay.
It's not common. I mean, every once in a while, look, I was just on the other end of that. I had somebody call me. They had already made an offer on a property directly through a listing agent.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go anywhere. They then started working with me. Then they circled back to that property and they told me that they have already seen that property with that listing agent, already made an offer with that. Well, I guess the point that they made an offer that didn't go anywhere might be irrelevant. That listing agent showed them the property.
Mm-hmm.
Before I took that buyer back to that property, I called that listing broker and I said, hey, I'm working with Jeffrey. I know that you've already shown him the property. I don't want to get into a fight about procuring cause later.
Okay.
How about I pay you a referral fee?
Okay.
And we came to an agreement and it was a 10% referral fee. It wasn't like a normal, normally pay 25% if it was actually referred to. If somebody actually, if I referred you a client, you would pay me 25%. I wasn't paying this listing agent 25% because she didn't refer them to me. They came to me, but I also know that I could get through the entire transaction representing that buyer, and then she can come after the commissions, the buyer's agent commissions.
Yeah.
So we just put a written agreement together saying, that I owe 10% referral fee, and that it's understood that she does not have procuring cause. Only a referral fee on that particular property, by the way. I'm not paying her 10%. If he doesn't buy that property and he buys something else, then it's mine. It's
Okay.
only on that one property where she had procuring costs. It doesn't happen often. I want to say in 15 years I've been in business, maybe twice. It's not
Okay.
it's not a common thing. Excuse me. Yeah. And by the way, if this were to happen, that they were represented by another broker, well, let me try to think this through. No, I take that back. I'm going to stop myself from saying that because that's not true. So yeah, it doesn't, procuring cause doesn't happen very often. They're giving us the authorization to market the property. So the way I explain that to my clients is, what that means is you're giving me permission to get photography of your home, and we're going to plaster it all over the web like a giant billboard. It's going to be all over the place, all the photos of your house. You're going to give me permission to put a sign in the yard. You're going to give me permission to advertise this all over the internet on multiple sites, not just the multiple listing service or MLS. There's going to be a lockbox on the property. That's how other agents are going to be able to show the property. And yeah, that's how I explain the authorization to market. Also says on here, by the way, the seller authorizes third parties such as inspectors and appraisers to access the property by lockbox or other means with seller's advanced consent. So we are not giving out the lockbox codes to appraisers or inspectors without first talking to the seller. So make sure you have advanced consent. Appraisers and inspectors are licensed by the state of Ohio, so they should be following similar guidelines and codes of ethics as we do. I still wouldn't let an inspector in the house without an agent present. So, and I'm sorry, and back to that too with showings and things. I would also tell your sellers, we can't control exactly who these buyers are coming into the house. We can make sure they're working with licensed agents, but we don't know who the buyers themselves are. And hopefully they're all honest people, but don't take the chance. So if you have any valuables, if you have any medications that might have some value to it, don't leave it out. Make sure you put things away. Fair housing. I'm not sure that this needs a whole lot of explanation, but maybe it does. But it lists here all the protected classes. And when I present this to my sellers, I simply say, this paragraph talks about all the different protected classes. If you'd like me to go through them, I'm happy to go through them with you. But the bottom line is just don't discriminate. If somebody's ready, willing, and able, there's several protected classes, and whether they're in a protected class or not, I think it's just best to treat everybody the same, fairly and honestly. And I don't think it usually takes much more conversation than that. But if you prefer to handle this paragraph differently, you could certainly read through that you may not deny or make unavailable housing accommodations because of race, color, religion, sex, family status. There's military statuses protected now. Ohio has sexual orientation is protected in the state of Ohio. It's not federal, but it is in the state of Ohio. So there's several protected classes. They're all listed here. Just don't discriminate whether they're protected or not. Seller disclosures. So I usually go through this paragraph pretty quickly. I just basically say, look, there's 2 disclosures that you guys are going to have to fill out for the transaction, assuming the house was built prior to 1978. If it's after 78, then it's only 1. First is a federal lead-based paint disclosure. And I usually tell people that, look, if you don't have knowledge or reports, and most people don't, I think, again, in 15 years, maybe twice, it's come up where somebody has had knowledge or reports. I'm sorry, Alicia, I see you got your hand up.
Oh, you didn't have to stop. You can finish what you're saying. I have a
Oh, okay,
related
I wasn't
question.
sure if this was, if you were going back to fair housing and I missed
No.
your hand before.
Disclosures, sorry.
Okay, yeah, so there's the federal lead-based paint disclosure. Most people have no knowledge and no reports. You might on occasion come across somebody who does have knowledge or reports. I think that we're going to start to see a change in that people will have knowledge in the city of Cleveland. If you guys are working at all within the city of Cleveland now has a, I think they call it the lead safe program. So now that they don't have a point of sale inspection, but they do have this lead inspection. So I think we might see some changes to that where sellers may have knowledge or may have reports of lead or the absence of lead if they've tested and had it mitigated. We might start to see a change in that where we'll start to see more sellers that do have knowledge and reports. And then there's the state of Ohio residential property disclosure form, which you guys should all have seen my Facebook post yesterday and my email that went out yesterday about the disclosure form. It changed last month in June. We didn't get it uploaded into .loop till yesterday, but it is now updated in .loop. It's 6 pages now instead of 5. It's still really 5. The 6 pages and the amendment and an addendum to that disclosure. So the first 5 pages is pretty much the same as how the seller was filling it out before. I always tell them, fill it out to the best of your knowledge. If you have to ask the question about whether something has to be disclosed or not, better safe than sorry and disclose it. We are not attorneys, so we're not going to give advice on that. And we're not actually not allowed to help them through that. They need to complete that on their own. But if they do ask questions, I always tell them best is to over disclose, because you don't want to think that you don't have to disclose something and then you end up getting sued later. Seller gets sued later because they didn't disclose something they did have knowledge of. And maybe it was an honest mistake that they didn't believe that had to be disclosed, so they left it off. So I always say better to over disclose than under disclose. Alicia, go ahead.
Okay, so I've not worked with a seller yet, but as a buyer's agent, I see a lot of times like these multifamily homes in Cleveland where everything is checked like, no, we don't have any knowledge of that. So I know that that's not true, especially if they've owned it for 20 years. They must have had something that they've fixed on it. Who is liable if, I'm guessing it's the seller, but is the agent, could they be at all liable if the seller lies, basically?
If the agent has knowledge of, let's say, a basement flood, right? Seller decided not to disclose that the basement has water in there, right? If I, as the listing agent, was aware of this and I chose not to disclose it, first of all, if I had knowledge of it, my first step would be have a conversation with the seller that this is a required disclosure. You said that you don't have water in the basement, but we already discussed that you did have a little moisture seepage. I would have that conversation. Frankly, if it were me and they still said, no, Rick, I'm not disclosing that. I don't think it needs to be disclosed. And I'm not going to disclose it. I would probably eventually, I mean, maybe have a few more discussions first, but eventually I would probably be firing that seller, number one. Number two is if you have knowledge of it and you did not disclose it, then yes, you're responsible. You could be held liable for it. If you had no idea that the basement had flooded last year, then no, I mean, you can't disclose something you don't have knowledge of. By the way, same thing goes for the seller's disclosure. You know, I often tell my buyers, look, the seller said there's no mold in the attic, but let's be honest, most people don't go into their attics. There could be mold up there. It's not that they're lying. They just don't have knowledge. The disclosure is, do you have knowledge of these things in the house? If they don't have knowledge that there's mold in the house, then they're not going to disclose it. And that's not, I don't believe that the seller would have any liability if they truly did not have knowledge of that mold in the attic, right? But that's why the buyers should do their own due diligence and have their private home inspection to verify that there is no mold in the attic. And if there is, then it's a material defect that becomes a conversation later, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. I do have one more question about lead-based paint.
Sure.
Let's see. So as a buyer's agent, yesterday I was filling out an offer and the house was built in 93 and they had the lead-based paint filled out and signed by the seller.
Yep.
Why do you think they would do that? And then I'm not required to have my buyer sign that,
No,
right?
you're not
Because it
required,
happened-
but you could. I see that sometimes. Some brokerages just say this is a requirement on all all files. We have to have a lead-based paint. It's overkill. Our policy at Keller Williams is only have it if the house was built prior to 78, then it's a required form. And if it's built after 78, it's not a required form, because that's what the federal law is. But I think some brokerages might just be covering themselves and making sure. There's no harm in having your buyer sign that.
Okay.
There's certainly no harm. I don't think it's necessary, but if the listing agent gives you pushback that why didn't your buyer sign this disclosure, we need to have this disclosure signed. I mean, I don't think there's any, again, it's overkill. I don't think it's necessary, but it's I don't think it's going to hurt, right?
Thank you.
Yep. Otherwise, you need to find out when you're listing the property if there's any liens on the property. I shouldn't say you need to find out. You should ask that question. A lot of times sellers don't know. You might be surprised when, or they might be surprised when mechanics lien pops up on a property. They had no idea. But you want to ask that question. You want to make sure that there's no foreclosures going on. You can ask that question from them. You can also see that from the public records on Realist. If you're pulling up the public records through Realist in the MLS, you can see foreclosure history. Is there a divorce going on? That might be an important thing to know. Or if there was a divorce, I've had other properties where there's two names on the title, and I'm expecting to have John and Jane Doe sign a listing agreement to find out that they've been divorced, and Jane got a quitclaim deed from John, and John's not on the title anymore, but they never filed that. I find this a lot with divorce attorneys. They get those quitclaim deeds and they just keep it in their file, and they never file it with, they keep it in the attorney file and they never send it down to the recorder's office. So you need to just verify all that, and if there was something like that where the attorneys just got this quitclaim deed sitting in their file and it's never been recorded, just make sure you get a copy of it, ask them to record it. And if not, or you can always provide it to the title company and have them record it. Hang on one second. Sorry, guys. Okay, sorry, just want to shut the door. If there is anything specific that they know about, you can always list it here, like plumber, mechanic lien. You know, you can list that there if you do discover something. If not, the title company's job is to make sure. Oh, another important thing in the disclosures, by the way, is if your seller knows any, has received any notices, written notices from the sheriff's office about sex offenders in the neighborhood, then you should let them know that they have to disclose that too. They would be, and it's, by the way, it's only for written notices. So if they receive the postcard saying that there's a sex offender in the neighborhood, not every sex offender gets a postcard mailed out to the neighbors. So depending on their level of offense. But if they received a postcard, then that needs to be disclosed. If there's somebody who's registered but hasn't received, they haven't sent out postcards for it, that's on the buyer to do their due diligence to discover that, and that's all public record. You can find that on the sheriff's website. But if they know of it, they should disclose that. Alicia, to answer your question from before too, it's actually right here. So confidentiality, the Ohio law requires broker to keep confidential information that the seller designates as such, unless disclosure is required by law. And when I go through this listing agreement with my sellers, I usually say, look, everything I learn about you through this process, it's going to be kept confidential. I'm not talking about it with anybody else, just between us, unless the law requires it. And the only time the law is really going to require it is if you choose not to disclose something that needs to be disclosed. If your basement has never flooded in the 40 years that you've been here, and today it flooded, and you said, Rick, don't worry about it, I'm going to clean it up, nobody's going to know the difference. Well, I know now, and I'm going to have to, if you're not willing to disclose it, then I have to disclose it. And by the way, I think there's a soft way for that disclosure in that case of basements never flood in 40 years and now it just happened for the first time. I think there's a pretty soft way to put that into a disclosure that's not going to be alarming. And we can just say, in 40 years, the basement only flooded one time. This last year, we had the sewers jetted out or cleaned out or snaked out, or it was during a big storm when the city sewers were overwhelmed. You can kind of soften it up so that it's still disclosed, but it's softened up. Electronic surveillance. This is important because in the state of Ohio, we need to disclose if we're being recorded. If I'm recording you in my house and I'm not there, one of the people that's being recorded needs to be aware that they're being recorded. So if I'm home and you come into my house and I'm there and we're having a conversation, I know you're being recorded, you don't have to know. However, that's not how it usually works in our transactions. Usually seller's not there, I'm not there, you're there as the buyer's agent with your buyer, and so you need to know, the buyer's agent needs to be aware that they're being recorded. So you should be asking if there's electronic surveillance. If the answer is yes, by the way, that could just be as simple as a Ring doorbell, or they make those little indoor cameras, the Ring cameras in the houses. Doesn't have to be some sophisticated surveillance equipment. Alexas, I think I'm pretty sure I have an Alexa at home and I'm not that tech savvy, but I'm pretty sure if I wanted to, I could probably somehow open up Alexa and listen to the conversations happening in my house right now. So if that's going on, we need to disclose that there is surveillance devices in the property. And then if the answer is yes, go in the MLS in the broker remarks and put it in the broker remarks. We all know the broker remarks are not made public, right? So don't put it in your public remarks that's going out to everybody. every website. Zillow will pick that up, Realtor.com, Redfin, all those different websites will all pick up those public remarks. But the broker remarks are kept in the MLS only. So any agents reading that will now have that disclosure that there's recording devices or listening devices on the property. And by the way, on a similar note, when I'm representing a buyer, I usually tell my buyers, just assume that there is some, I mean, everybody's got something right these days. There's probably more houses with some sort of listening or recording device than without. So I tell my buyers, just assume that somebody could be listening to us. So let's not have very confidential conversations in the property anymore. Cool. Moving on to fixtures. We all know that fixtures stay with the house in Ohio. So that means anything that's attached to the walls, to the floor, to the ceiling. That could be a light fixture, that could be a plumbing fixture, that could be landscaping is a fixture, it's in the ground. Carpet that's attached to the house, not an area rug. An area rug is not a fixture. Those all, the state of Ohio says that all stays with the house, unless it's disclosed. So the best time to find out that they're planning to take something is when you get the listing. So I was just at a listing appointment this morning. They said they're taking the chandelier from the entryway. So on the excluded fixture section, I just wrote front foyer chandelier is excluded. The better way to handle that, by the way, with a light fixture or with something, any fixture, I guess, is I would prefer that my seller just removes that chandelier now, puts it in storage, go to Home Depot, get some cheap light fixture, throw it up there. It'll look nice. The buyer will never know the difference. But if that buyer loves that light fixture as much as my seller likes it, then it could become a sticking point when they find out that it's not staying with the house. If there is an excluded fixture, again, MLS broker remarks will be the appropriate place to put that in there. And then when you get an offer on the property, make sure that it's written in your contract that it's excluded. Home warranties. You guys all know we're using America's Preferred Home Warranty. That's our preferred vendor here at KW Living. Personally, I think they're the best right now because your client can use whatever contractor they want to use. They don't have to go to a preferred vendor list. So what that means is when they come home and find there's a plumbing emergency and their hot water tank is leaking on their basement floor, with other home warranties, they would have to call the home warranty company first and make a claim. And then they would have to reach out to one of the preferred vendors of that warranty. Whereas with ours, they can go and call the plumber out and get the emergency taken care of. And then meanwhile, start making a claim with the warranty company. We are required to present our clients with an opportunity to take a warranty. They're not required to take that warranty, but we are required to give them an option for it. Anybody know why? No? Going once, going twice, nobody's off mute. Okay, so the reason we require they either accept it or decline it is because if there's ever a lawsuit on that particular transaction, America's Preferred Home Warranty will pay our deductible, or I think it's contribute towards our deductible. I can't remember the exact numbers. They will contribute towards our deductible. So that's why if we don't have an acceptance or a waiver on it, then they will not help us. So I like to say yes. Cost is $425. And paid by the seller through closing. Now, I also, when I present this, I also tell my clients that, look, it's negotiable. So if you choose not to have a home warranty, that's fine. If the buyer then comes with an offer and says, we want the home warranty paid by the seller, it becomes negotiable. The difference if you have it at the listing time of listing versus the time of the purchase agreement is that the seller will not get coverage if it's only accepted at the purchase agreement. So there is some seller benefits to having a warranty. That water tank that I used as an example, the seller's covered if that water tank fails. If they only accepted the warranty with the purchase agreement, not with the listing, then the buyer will have that coverage, but not the seller. So there's some benefits to it. Point of sale. Every city's a little different with point of sale. Some don't have it, some have it, some are very strict, some are very loose. You need to know the municipality rules where you're listing the property. Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, they're pretty strict about their, University Heights, inside, outside inspections. There's escrow holds. Mayfield Heights is fairly loose where they do exterior inspections only. Some of the communities that are doing exterior only also say if it's a condo, then they don't do a point of sale. Mayfield, for instance, I've sold a lot in Woodhawk. So while Mayfield has an exterior only inspection, because Woodhawk is an association that maintains the exterior of the property, the city says, well, we don't need to do a point of sale in Woodhawk then because it's not the seller's problem, it's not the owner's problem if it's not maintained. Every city's different also about assuming violations. So depending on the house, depending on the price point, you may want to advise your client to make the property point of sale compliant. So what that means is city's going to come out, do their inspection, give you a list of violations, and then your seller is going to go correct all those violations. And then have the city back out and get you a letter saying that it's compliant. Now you can sell it to the buyer knowing that it's point of sale compliant. If you prefer not to sell it compliant, you can always have a buyer assume violations. Again, every city is a little different, so you just need to know the rules in that municipality. Shaker Heights, for instance, a buyer can assume violations, but they need to get an estimate from a contractor who's licensed in the city. That estimate needs to be approved by the commissioner at Building and Housing. And then they will approve the buyer to assume the violations with an escrow hold of 150% of all the violations. Cleveland Heights only wants an escrow hold on bigger items, and they'll tell you how much that escrow is. And it's usually not, at least in Cleveland Heights, it's not usually consistent with what the actual repair costs are. A roof, they might say, an escrow hold of $1,000 or $2,000. I'm not sure what they do for roofs, but in the meantime, that roof could cost you $7,000 or $8,000 to replace. So it's not nice. You just need to be aware. Alicia, sorry if I missed your hand earlier. I don't know.
I just raised it. Thank you.
Okay.
So my question regarding point of sale is, oh my gosh, I just went blank. Shoot. Oh, escrowing the amount as a buyer. Does that have to be paid in cash, or can you roll that into the loan, the mortgage? Like, how does that work?
Probably not rolled into a loan. I mean, that's a question for a lender. If there's, I suppose it could, depending on the financing type. If they're doing like a rehab loan, it's possible that the lender might say we can finance it as part of the rehab loan. But if it's a traditional loan, then it's probably out of pocket from somebody. Again, it's all negotiable. So I have one where we're holding escrow funds from a seller, but the buyer is going to take care of those violations later. And that was negotiated up front. So, but yeah, somebody's going to be putting the money away. If it's through a rehab loan, it might be the lender putting that money away, but it'll have to be put away. And the title company will not be allowed to close until they have either a compliance or some sort of assumption of those violations. And they'll also follow the city rules. The best way to know what your particular city rule is, go on their website or search Shaker Heights point of sale, and you'll find all the information. I just did that for Twinsburg. I wasn't sure exactly what the Twinsburg rules were, so I Googled Twinsburg point of sale. I found out that they do exterior only. Again, not for condominiums, because the condos will maintain the outside. And I actually, in that case in Twinsburg, I just copied and pasted that link and emailed it to my client. So I said, here's the information that you need to know before we list, so that you can complete this point of sale inspection. And here's the link to the city's website. And if you have questions, you should reach out to them. All right. Security, insurance, and maintenance. Basically, we're not property managers. We're not maintaining your property. Obviously, if we show up to your property for any reason to show it to a buyer for an open house or whatever reason we might be there, if we walk down to the basement and see it's flooded, obviously, yes, we're going to call you and let you know, but we're not responsible to be there every day and check on the property. It's more for vacant houses, but also we want to make sure that the seller is maintaining insurance on the property, that they're continuing to pay the utilities on the property, make sure they understand that it's their obligation to continue those utility payments through the day of closing, including the day of closing. The day of closing belongs to the seller. Got it? It also talks in here about cold weather. So come November, you might see me talking to agents, maybe in my broker update, about winterizing properties. Do we all know what winterizing means? If you have a vacant house and you don't have the heat running, pipes tend to freeze in Cleveland in the cold winters. So I would advise my clients with vacant houses to have the properties winterized. All that means is a plumber is going to come in, they're going to disconnect the water meter. They're going to drain all the water out of the pipes in the house. They will then go, sewer gases will then start coming up through your sinks and toilets. So they take antifreeze and they pour it into the toilet so that sewer gases can't find their way back through those traps. So if you ever walk through a house and you see a toilet full of red liquid, that's antifreeze, and that's just because the house has been winterized. And if you turn on a faucet, there's no water coming out. You should be advising your clients on vacant houses come November to start winterizing. We got electronic data security. This is really important, guys. There's a lot of wire fraud out there today. So I always tell my clients, look, I'm never going to ask you to wire any money anywhere. If you ever see an email from me saying you need to wire some money to this account as part of your real estate transaction, call me before you do anything, because I didn't send it. Wendy, my assistant, did not send it. The only ones sending it would be a title company asking for you to wire some funds. Actually, if we're working with sellers, hopefully they're not wiring funds. Hopefully they're receiving funds, not sending funds, but I suppose they could be upside down and wiring funds. But don't trust that. Anytime you get wire instructions, call the person sending it to you. So even if it is from the title company, I tell my clients, before you send that wire to the title company, even if you think it's legit, call that title company and say, hey, I just got this wire instructions from you. Is this correct? Some title companies now are even not including the last 3 or 4 digits of their wire instructions, so that you're forced to call them and ask for it and verify it. Along the same note, what I do, and I encourage everybody to do, to be vigilant about this, because I think we've got a giant target on our back. Scammers know that they can hack into our email, find out who our clients are, and then they can make it look like that email is coming from us. What I do is I use a program called LastPass. There's several different programs out there, but LastPass is the one that I use. It's a password generator. So, you know, Alicia, if I know what street you live on and I know your kids' names, there's a chance I might be able to figure out your passwords, or the year you were born. I might be able to figure out your passwords to everything. What LastPass does is when I have to when I'm signing up for something that requires a password, it's going to auto generate something for me. It's going to be like 16 characters long. It's going to be different letters and numbers, and it's going to make no sense. Nobody's ever going to figure that one out, including myself. So then it actually, you can see it on here, the 3 dots with it's just an extension on my browser. So when I need a password, I can go there and find my password. I also have the app on my phone. So if I'm logging into something off my phone, I can get it that way. It's a good program, and I think it keeps our clients safe, keeps us safe, and our clients safe, because I don't believe a hacker is going to be able to figure out my password and get into my email and then start emailing my clients with wire instructions.
Another good tip is to use a different password that's really complicated for every single thing. Like, don't reuse passwords at all.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I just tell your clients, don't send wires without calling the person sending it first, because this is a prime target for that type of scam. And then once we sign it, it's a binding agreement, and seller will sign, we will sign, you'll sign here, designate, it says broker, but underneath it, it says designated licensee. So that's where you would sign this. That's our listing agreement. Questions before I move on to the few other documents that are going to be required? Nope. Okay. Next 6 pages is our residential property disclosure form. When I present this to my clients, I say, look, it's required in the state of Ohio. Everybody selling a property in Ohio has to fill it out. There's a few exemptions. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. If you inherited the property and you've never lived in the property, if it's a court-ordered sale, if it's an estate, there's a few exemptions. People are confused that if I'm an investor and I'm flipping this property and I've never lived in the house, or I'm the landlord and I'm selling it and I've never lived there, people think that they're exempt. They're not exempt. They still have to fill it out. Banks are exempt, by the way, if you sell a bank-owned property. So there are a few exemptions, but most people are not exempt from this. They need to fill this out. Here, if I'm a landlord and I've never lived here, I'm going to check the box, owner is not occupying the property. And then if owner is not occupying the property since what date, I would just write never. So they need to fill this out, and putting an X through the entire page and saying never occupied the property is not an acceptable way to fill it out. They can fill out that they have, do you know of any previous or current leaks? The answer could be no. If they don't know, it doesn't mean that there's not any previous or current leaks. It just says that they don't know of them. So they still have to fill this out. That's a big misconception about investors and filling these things out. Mechanical systems, everybody's got an electrical system and plumbing, hopefully. But not everybody has a lawn sprinkler. So if they don't, they can check NA. So just make sure. Also with hazardous material, you can check yes, no, or unknown. I think the best practice is if you don't know that there's not lead paint, unknown, not no. I think most people have a tendency to check no because they don't know of it, but unknown in this case would be a better answer. Other known material defects. This is important. if you guys think it's a material defect, this is where you should write it. I have listed houses where there's been suicides in the property. That's a material defect. It needs to be disclosed. You can write that here. Actually, in the 2 cases that I had that instance, my clients were not comfortable putting it on this form and broadcasting it. I'm going to upload this form into the MLS, and everybody now is going to know. They weren't comfortable doing that, so that's fine. I had them write it on a separate piece of paper. And I made sure when I got an offer, before we negotiated that offer, I made sure that that buyer had that extra disclosure and signed off on it, and they knew going into it. But it has to be disclosed. An interesting thing, if you guys go to Ohio Realtors website and go through their blog, Peg Rittenhouse used to be our in-house counsel over there, and she wrote several legal blogs. Ghosts, whether you believe in ghosts or not, ghosts are a material defect. So if there's a if there's a I don't know, knowledge or trying to think what's the word I'm looking for. If there's talk that people say there's ghosts in this particular property, whether you believe in ghosts or not, it needs to be disclosed. So just be aware of that. I know that's like a really funny one. Yeah, Alicia.
What if it's just a death, like grandma died in the house and there's nothing else to it?
Yeah, I think that's a gray area, and I would go with that if it's a natural death, it's probably not a disclosure issue. But if it's a death by any sort of violence, it certainly is a disclosure issue. Those are material defects. So I think a natural cause. If you read those blogs, Peg actually talks about that in some of those blogs on Ohio Realtors. By the way, that's a great resource. Ohio Realtors website. I'm not here to plug them today, but they're a great resource. And frankly, that's where I go when agents call me with challenging deals and some big challenges that I don't know off the top of my head. That's my first place where I go try to find an answer for agents is Ohio Realtors website, but specifically the blogs under the legal stuff. There's a lot of good information, and she does talk about that. And I don't think it's a very clear answer. And I would be comfortable saying that it's not a disclosure issue. Owner signs, buyer signs. The difference between this one and the old one is really here, where it talks about buyer should exercise whatever due diligence purchaser deems necessary. So with all of this stuff here, the one I was pointing at is underground tanks and mines, but sex offenders, hazardous material, things like that. And then there's Appendix A. This is brand new. So if your buyer this is basically saying if your buyer is concerned about any hazardous materials, these are some resources you can go to find out about radon, to find out about lead, mold, asbestos, formaldehyde. If these are things that are concerning to you, then these are the resources that are there for you to learn about those materials. Got it? Cool. Lead paint disclosure. This is not changed forever. Like I said, 99% of the time, seller has no knowledge and no reports, but now with the new rules in Cleveland, we might start to see this change a little bit, where sellers may have knowledge or reports. The seller's going to fill out this top section if they're they're going to check one box under A and one box under B. So usually it's checked like this. No knowledge and no reports, unless they do have knowledge or reports. This next section, I can't uncheck that there. This next section's for the purchaser, so that they've acknowledged that they've received copies of the EPA pamphlet protecting your family from lead in the home, that they've received or waived their opportunity to do an assessment of the risk. You are going to initial here that you've informed the seller of their obligation to disclose anything if they do have knowledge. And then sellers will sign and you'll sign, and you'll upload this in the MLS so that when you get offers, the buyer can sign as well. And this is the home warranty. Remember, I had said that you have to have it accepted or waived on your listings. By the way, on your buyers too, they need to accept or waive, even if they're getting, if the seller is providing your buyer with a HSA home warranty, let's just say. We still require that you have a waiver on the America's Preferred. And that's again, because if there ever becomes a lawsuit, America's Preferred is going to help Keller Williams Living with our deductible, even if they have not accepted it, just knowing that they've been presented an opportunity to have an America's Preferred home warranty. Fill it out, pretty self-explanatory. Sellers information, buyers information, your information. And this is where your seller will sign if they're offering it. And down here, this is where they would sign if they're waiving the right to have the warranty. By the way, you guys all know that we also get paid for warranties. So if they do accept this warranty and the property closes, you're getting a $50 check from America's Preferred Home Warranty. So just know that there's also an added incentive. There is some, they don't just send it to you because you sold it. You will have to go online and fill out some forms to be able to get paid, and that's a RESPA requirement. But you could get an extra $50. And if you want to know about that, Renee teaches a class regularly about how to fill out that form for so that you can get paid on these. The deductible is $100 and the premium's $425. If they want to do a $50 deductible at $460, can certainly do that. But most of my clients, if they accept this, they just want the $100. If it's a condo, it's $75 deductible and only $399. So if you're selling anything different, then it could be less. New construction also, 75 deductible. New construction is a little bit more, but new construction also kicks in on day 366 because the builder is giving you a 365-day warranty. So this is picking up for 1 year after, I'm sorry, this new construction is actually for 3 years after the builder's 1 year. So now if you've gone from a builder's 1 year and you add this, now you've got a 4-year warranty. Multifamilies are a little different. There's all sorts of buyer upgrades. And there's also seller upgrades. And I did not print out the entire brochure. There is a copy of the full brochure in .loop, or you can pick up a hard copy in the next to the printer over there on those shelves next to the printer. But when you look at that, you'll see that the seller does have, the buyer definitely has more protection than a seller. For that 12-month period after closing, but the seller will, if they accept it during the listing, they will get some seller protection from the date of listing until the date of closing. Like I said before, a hot water tank is a good example of something that's got seller coverage. The AC is not something that has seller coverage unless they take there's a seller upgrade they can elect to have. Most people don't take those upgrades, but if they do take the upgrade, then they would have some other coverages, but yeah. That concludes my listing presentation. Do you guys have questions, comments, concerns? Need me to go back to discuss anything further? Yeah, Nancy.
I have a question, not about this one. Well, it is about this one. If we want to go back once we get a listing, where exactly do we find this video?
Gara's gonna send out the link. She always sends
Oh,
out the
okay.
email link. And then that's a good question. I don't know. Gara houses all of our videos somewhere so that you have access to it. I'll find out. I'll ask her to send that out so that we have the answer to that, where these videos are.
Okay, one more question. Is
Yeah.
there, are you doing a Zoom like this for the buyers forums as well, or have you already done one?
No,
Yeah,
I'm doing a contract class once a month.
Okay.
And so our next month is gonna be purchase agreements. Here we go, on August 9th at 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and every other month I'll do purchase agreement in August, and I'll be doing listing agreement again in September. So we'll just alternate every month. Once a month there will be a contract class, one of the two.
Real quick, I put the link for the training videos in the chat.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yeah.
It's in kwagentsguide.com. Okay. If you don't know kwagentguides.com, that's where you can find the video, but that's also where you can find our policies and procedures. If you ever want to look, if you ever want to know if you're allowed to participate in wholesaling properties, you can go there and you'll see that we're not allowed to participate in wholesale properties. If you want to know what our minimum commission requirement is, you can find that there. If you want to know if you're selling your own personal property or property for your mom, you want to know what you are allowed to do as far as commissions, that's where you can find all that information too. Cool. If there's nothing else, I'm going to end this session. Nothing else going once?
Thank you.
Oh, my
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. I appreciate all you guys.